Good afternoon, everyone. This is Scott Jorgens, Senior Marketing Manager at Endeavour Solutions. Pleased to present to you our fun formatting tips for Management Reporter. Endeavour Solutions is a Microsoft Gold ERP partner and Silver partner for CRM. We've been in business for 25 years now and have a focus on management consulting and advisory services for our clients, both in the realms of ERP, accounting, and CRM, a variety of business process enhancements leveraging the expertise of our various industry experts in manufacturing, distribution, supply chain, not-for-profit, healthcare, aquaculture, variety of industries, and all their workflow automations associated with those. We have a strong implementation team, both for implementations and upgrades of Dynamics GP and CRM, and a variety of third-party tools for e-business, mobile, and bringing clients to the cloud. That's both with Office 365 and Azure, and the web clients and soon-to-be HTML5 clients for Microsoft Dynamics GP. Like to talk also about our efforts in supporting existing clients with their hot fixes with help desk, and our technical team that are really proficient in creating custom integrations to other systems. We also have a limited time promotion for Microsoft Dynamics GP. For those that are new to GP on the line, are in the process of acquiring or have subsidiaries that are not yet on GP. So new GP customers, there's some promotions for significant discounts. And for those that are existing clients, thank you for all the existing clients that are on the phone today. Sorry, there are no discounts, but we did want to let you know that there will be price increases as of January 1st, 2016. Obviously, a variety of conditions do apply. But given these increases, mostly due to the changes in the Canadian versus US dollar and other evaluations that Microsoft has provided, the prices will be increasing, and now may be a really good time to consider upgrading to Great Plains 2015 R2, and into the new year, GP 2016 has been recently announced, and that's coming out in April or May of 2016. For more details, please contact Steve Ewing. You can find his contact information at online within the Contact Us section, www.endeavorsolutions.ca. Thanks very much, and Brittany, over to you.
Perfect, thanks, Scott. So my name is Brittany. I'm a consultant with Endeavour. So how about we hop into a little bit of fun tips and tricks when it comes to formatting of our fund management reporter, okay? So I'm actually just going to hop right into management reporter here. So this should be what we're used to seeing, is just that report's definition, okay? So what I have here today is actually a really basic trial balance, but before we get into the fun stuff, what I do want to talk about is I will be using actually the viewer itself. So if you're not used to using the viewer, you may want to actually turn it on as your default. So to find that default, you'll actually find it under Tools and under Options. Okay, and you should see a little tick box here in the middle that says Use Management Reporter Report Viewer as Default Viewer. That's what we're going to be using today. Okay? The little one there. The other way you can also view it is also in your web browser as well. If this box is unchecked, you'll be viewing it in your web browser. So it may look a little different if you have this unchecked than what you'll be seeing today. Okay. While we're still on a little bit of housekeeping, if you have a lot of users using your MR, then you may want to have a little bit of housekeeping. We can use these folders to the left-hand side here to kind of keep our reports and our rows and our columns a little bit more organized, especially if you kind of don't want to see all of those at once, okay? So simply, if you see here, I actually have one underneath a folder, but if you would like a new folder, you can right-click on any folder and hit New, and you'll receive a new folder in which you can call it whatever you need to. So if you say that this was Brittany's reports, you'll have a new folder, and then you can simply drag and drop anything you need to go into there. So I can drag and drop this in here instead of in Brittany's test, and now you'll see my trial balance. This same concept applies for your rows and column definitions as well. If you've noticed in my rows, I've actually used the same folders as well, just as a little bit of housekeeping to keep that a little cleaner. Okay, so let's actually get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty here and see what my report looks like with no real formatting. Okay, so I'm just going to hit generate here on this report. Nothing exciting, so we're going to add some excitement to it. So if we just give it a second here just to populate. Okay, so here's my trial balance. Nothing exciting here. Okay, it's pretty bland. Okay, it's 2 pages. Okay, so nothing too exciting here. So the first things we're going to do is that I'm actually going to go back into the report definition itself to show you some settings inside of there. Okay. So the first one I want to show you is actually inside this settings tab that we see inside of our report definition. Okay, so we have some formatting inside of here, which is kind of good to know that it's here. The first one we have is those pesky negative numbers, or sometimes those negative numbers are a good thing, is whether we want to see that negative sign or we want to see the brackets. It's completely preferential, but we definitely want to use our preference to whatever it is that we like to see. So we have that preference inside of there. Okay. The next thing, we're still talking about those negative numbers. If we see that box right here, that we have this display negative numbers in red. So if you notice, if I actually check this off and I regenerate that report, we're going to see those numbers in red. The next one, which is one of, I have to admit, is one of my pet peeves, is those display digit separators. So that's the one that gives you those little commas between the 3 zeros to give you the 3 decimal places there, or the 3 digit places there, just to give it your readers a little bit of ease to reading those numbers. Okay. The next one we see there as well is display currency symbol on the first row. You've noticed that I actually have it checked off. If you uncheck this, you actually won't see any currency on the first rows. It'll actually just be the number itself. This one, the next one here is one I do want to talk about. Display blanks for zero amounts. Instead of showing the actual number 0, which is sometimes scary, we can actually have it display blank instead of displaying the 0. Now again, it's completely preferential, either or. Okay. The next one is this display rows with no amounts. As we all know, sometimes we have GL accounts that may not have any amounts that have been booked to them for the year or for the period or whatever we're reporting on, and they can take up a lot of space and sometimes kind of clog up our reports, and maybe we don't want to see them. So we have this display with no amounts. So if we actually check this off, we're still going to show those rows or those GL accounts that have had no amounts in them, but I like to keep it off just so I don't clog up my report. But again, completely up to you. Okay. And then as well, display reports with no active rows. So if those rows aren't active in our reports, we'll still display them if we check it off. So the main ones I want to show here is that I've ticked off that display negative numbers in red, and I'm displaying those negative numbers with those bracket signs. So I'm just going to generate that report again just to show you what that looks like. So now we have those negative numbers in red, which I know isn't super exciting. So now that we see those negative numbers in reds and we see those dollar signs on the top line, I'm now going to talk about some other formatting we have. So I'm actually going to hop back into that report definition, and I'm going to start talking some formatting we have in the rows itself. So I'm going to hop back into that report and go into our actual rows itself. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is if in our reports we'd like to actually add a title midway through a report or kind of group some things together and give it some formatting options. So I'm actually going to leave I'm going to call this one cash. And I may not want to just, if I leave like this, it's going to show like it is just like all the other accounts. In our column C here, we have this format code. And if you notice here, we have this LFT, RGT, and CEN. This is going to give us titles, and it'll make it look like a title either in the right, left, or center, and you can pick whichever one works for you. So I'm actually going to pick the left one for this particular one. Okay. So I'm going to make our title there for cash. And you know what? On this title, I think I might also give it some color as well because it's going to be a little boring. So I'm going to give it, I'm going to make it bright, nice and bold, and I'm also going to add that color in there as well by highlighting and just selecting that paint bucket we have up there. And I'm really feeling the color pink today. Okay. Just to make it nice and bold to us. Okay, so that should spice up our report just a little bit. The next thing I want to talk about is we may want to actually highlight some other information, like maybe the totals down at the bottom. So I'm just going to scroll down here to the bottom here. And this total may be really exciting for us, and maybe we want to add a box around it, and maybe we're unsure on how to actually create that box. So if we actually using that format code again inside of our rows, if we double click in that box, we can actually start a box as well. So you'll see this BXB, which is begin box around rows. So we can either type in that BXB or use our double click and go into here as well. So I'm going to be using the double clicking. So I'm going to begin the box here. And where I want to end the box, I'm going to put in that format code as well. So I'm going to end that box simply by double clicking where I want it to end and go BXC, which is complete the box around the rows. Okay. So this is just going to be a straight box around it. Okay. So those are kind of going to spice up a report and maybe pull some more attention to things we need to see. Okay. So now that we've added those to our rows, and we might think they're really pretty, I'm going to hit save here and generate that report just to show you what that's going to look like at the final product. Now, of course, you can add multiple boxes or multiple rows that have colors and multiple colors in your reports as well if maybe we need to highlight different things. Okay. So we're just going to see that report generate here. So if you notice now, we have that title here that we have. So since we typed in that cash and we made it a title, it actually pushes it to the left because I created a left title instead of putting it right in this description here under and showing it, looking at like it just another count that I have here. And we see that highlighting in bold that we have for that nice pink color I chose. Now, for that nice box that we put around the total, we should see it down here. So I've started that box, and we see that box here around. Okay, so we can, of course, add multiple boxes and start and end them wherever we need to do them or see them and have multiples inside of a report. Okay. So this is a little bit of formatting to our row, so I'm actually just going to exit out of there. Just we saw how that worked out. Okay. The next one, I just want to touch one last thing about that row, so I'm going to hop back into those rows as well, is there may be occasions where we want rows to only to not necessarily print. They may be there just for calculation purpose, or maybe just something for ourselves that we put in. We may not want to always see that, so we may want to use that column G, which is that print control. Now, of course, you can type in if you know those print controls, or we can use that double click and click in there and see what's going on. So let's double click inside there. So if I choose this non-printing row, this row won't print. That row will always exist and reside inside of there, but won't print when we actually generate this report. Okay? You'll also notice I highly encourage to go in here and play with some of these. We also have a use currency format in this row as well, okay? And you'll see a bunch in here as well, also to suppress the row detail and to suppress roll-ups. Please go in here and check them out. So it's just to use it for your print control options. It's just we want those in the report, but we don't necessarily want them to print. Okay? So for this one, I'm actually going to use a non-print for this row. Okay. The last thing I lied. There's one last thing I want to talk about in these rows, is that you've noticed on my totals, I've actually added some formatting as well, is that I have that single and that double line. If we're unsure how to create those single and double lines, it's a double click as well, and we can have that single and the double line. You'll also notice underneath it from lines 1 to line 5, we have that print thin line followed by thin line. You can go around in here and play with them, but this is where we find those lines that we had just for those nice little totals and those nice little formatting inside of there. Okay. Now, previously, we actually had talked about making this font bold, and if you notice up here, these look very similar to our other Microsoft products that we see, and we see the font and the size and the bolding. We can actually set a default for these ones if we want to make them kind of consistent across the board, if we have multiple reports or multiple people creating reports. Okay, so if we want to create those default fonts so that we have some consistency along our reports, we're actually going to hop up here into our format and go to the styles and formatting tab here. Okay. So if you notice here, I actually have it set to default right now, which is I have here. We also have, and you can add as many as you need to. We could actually create a new one if we wanted to and give it a name, and we could say that this is Endeavour default. Okay, so you tell it what font you want it to be. So I may really like whichever the font is that I really like, and we may want a particular font size as well, and maybe it's always to be bolded. Once we're happy with those, we simply go ahead and hit OK. And if you notice now we have a default. Of course, you can change any of the defaults that are here as well simply by highlighting them and hitting modify, and you can go in and change them to be whatever your preference is. It's just a little bit of housekeeping to try and keep all your reports a little bit more consistent. Okay. Of course, at any time, if any box, if you have wording that you really want to make really bold and really out there, you still can use these options up here and change them to be whatever it is you want them to be. Okay. One thing we do have as well up here that we don't use too often, but we do see some, is if we need to indent particular ones, we can highlight multiple simply by clicking, dragging, and dragging it down. Is we have this increase in indent, is we can put those indents in if we kind of need to push those accounts a little bit to the side. Instead of trying to add a column in there or doing some funky stuff like that, we do have that indenting. Of course, if we want to get rid of that indenting, it's just the button to the left here as well that decreases that indent as well. Okay. That is some of our fun formatting we have inside of our rows. Now let's talk a little bit about our columns that we know we love by now. So I'm just going to save my changes here, and I'm going to hop into the columns for this report. So these are the columns I'm sure we're used to seeing. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about up here is actually the headers we have in those columns. So I have simply just typed in a header here. If you do notice, we actually have 3 lines of headers, so you can have multiple pieces of information in each header if need be. Now, the one thing I do want to tell you inside the headers is that we can insert auto text so that we don't necessarily have to change these year after year. So if we click into one of these and use our double click again, this will bring into our column header box. We can insert auto text just so we could put in month name, and all of these insert text is all going to pull that information that's coming from the report definition when we set that date and time. Okay, so maybe we want to put the fiscal year in here and things like that, just so that we don't necessarily have to change them year after year when we have that fiscal year end change and we're doing those comparisons. We don't have to change them every year. It just automates those reports a little bit just by inserting that text. So I'm going to insert at fiscal year. Okay. Of course, inside of here as well, we have that justification that we're used to seeing in other products, left, center, and right. It's a completely preferential as well. As well, we have the format options, whether you want that to be a boxed or be underlined or thick underline. I'm actually going to choose none. Okay. So the next thing I also want to kind of draw your attention to as well is the spread from and spread to. If we wanted a header to say go from one column and spread across, say, all 3 columns or just 2 columns to kind of give them a grouping, we could actually start them as well. So I'm going to show you how that one's done just in our, I'm going to start in our column A and put it in our 3rd line here. Okay. So I am going to type in that information. So I'm going to say this is our GL accounts. Okay, and I'm going to use that by double clicking and use that little box with the 3 dots inside of there. And I'm going to say spread from column A to column B. It's simply just typing it in. There's no drop down. Just type in how many columns you want this to spread over. Okay. When you do spread them from one column to another, it automatically centers it, and we don't get to play with the justification anymore just because you're spreading it over multiple columns. So I'm just going to hit account here. I'm just going to hit OK now. Okay, so that looks after our headers. Of course, if we still want those options that we want to add some color to those headers, we can highlight them, use those paint buckets we saw before, underline it, bold it, make it larger, smaller, whatever it is we want to see, just like we had in the rows as well. Okay. If you do use color up here, it will only be in the header only. If you'd like to highlight some rows by colors, so if you're maybe doing a year-over-year comparison and maybe we want one year to be bright yellow and the other one to be white or something along those lines, to actually highlight the whole row, you actually need to go into this column type and actually select the color as well. So select that beautiful pink or yellow, whatever it is you want to see. So I'm actually going to make this report look a little crazy, maybe use some teal here. Okay. The other one I also want to see you see here is this column width. It's actually to auto fit right now. So it means it's going to automatically widen or shrink depending on what size of the data that's going inside of those columns. You can make these columns a particular width. I actually prefer to leave them as auto fit just because if those numbers get a little bit big, we want to make sure that it doesn't cut off any of them in there. The one I do want to talk about inside of here is we see that print control again, just like we saw in those rows. We're going to see it again in the columns, so that there may be certain columns that we don't necessarily want to print. Just like we had in the rows, maybe that column is a calculation. So inside of those, again, it's just a double click. We'll have those same print controls we saw in those rows. We'll have that no print or change a sign inside of a column, okay? Those we have inside of there, okay? We also see some conditional print options as well. So in here, it's another print control. It'll only print based on the criteria. So you do see one here that says print only if the period is less than the base period. Okay, and I highly encourage you to go in here and try them out. They are just print controls, so these columns won't disappear. They just won't necessarily be shown when you print. Okay. The last one I want to talk about is the justification we have inside of here is sometimes we have preferences to where we want the actual row to justify, and we don't have the same justifications we may see in Excel or other products where we have that center left or right. That justification actually resides down the bottom here. It's a simple double click which will give you that drop down that we are used to seeing of that left, center, or right. Okay, so I'm actually going to pick center for mine. Okay, and you guys can pick whatever you choose. Now, we also have currency override as well that I want to have a quick thought to as well. It's simply to do that, we're going to double click in that currency override. If you have a particular way you would like to see it, so we want to see negative numbers with brackets or just negative, and you want this to be specific to this column, not specific to the whole report, unlike that we showed at the beginning where we was under that settings tab, this will set this for just this column. So you could have columns be different for each individual column itself. Okay? So maybe this column is actually a percentage and we don't want those dollar signs. We're going to override it then to whatever's in the settings tab. So we're going to say that all of this column is percentage. Or maybe it's even custom. Maybe we're going to make it be whatever it is we want to see. We have that option as well. I'm going to trial balance here. Okay. And you can also tell it as well how many decimal places you want to see, especially if we're changing that column to say percentages. We may want 4 or 5 decimal places or maybe none. It's completely up to us. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK in there. So now we see that that format currency override we've put in there as well. Okay. Once I'm happy with all of my changes in here, just like anything else we change in here, if we don't hit save, it's actually not going to save anything we've done. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save in here and save that column. Now we've made quite a few changes, so we may want to see what all of those changes look like. So I'm actually going to generate that report again, just so that we can have a quick look to see what all of those changes are like, just to see what that right tail looks like and what all of those columns that we've put in. So I'm just going to wait for this report to populate itself.
While we wait, just a quick time check. We're halfway through, Brittany. So I do want to allow a little bit of time at the end to ask any questions and answers out to the audience and see if there's stuff that's valuable to share. If people just use the chat or question function, put your name in there and what your question is, and we'll go through them at the end. And if there's ones that are going to be valuable to everyone, we'll be sure to share them as part of the webinar. Otherwise, it could be an opportunity to follow up later. Additionally, I wanted to let everyone know that we are planning to have an in-depth management reporter training class, both at our Toronto office as well as at our Halifax office, probably mid to late November. So keep an eye out on your emails, or send us a quick email, and we'll be sure to add you to that list and make sure you're on our distribution list for notifications of updated courses and sessions. Back to you, Brittany. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so now we see those changes that we made. We see that bright teal that we made in the columns, and we see that bright purple we made in the rows. Okay, we have all of those we have there. Okay, but we may still say, even though I've added a lot of color here, is it still may not be all the things we want to see inside of our report. So things that might be missing out of this report might be some of those things we're used to seeing in all the other company documents in the headers and footers, might be those logos that we may want to put on our report. Okay, so I'm actually just going to hop back into that report definition and get out of the viewer here. And if you notice in that report definition, we have a headers and footers tab. So this is where we're going to add those fun things we like to see in all those company documents, like logos and those images that we have. So I'm going to first start with the header here and show you how to bring in those logos. So if you notice, we have two sections here. We have the header and we have the footer. We can actually put the logo in either or. We can put it in the header or footer, whichever is preferential to your company or where you think it best applies. But there is three sections in each. You see the first, second, and third section. They represent the left justification, middle, and right. Okay. So I'm actually going to put a logo in the top left, and the way we do that is we actually highlight our cursor inside of the section that we're looking for, and then go to this images. Okay. If you notice, I actually already have an image here, but if we're unsure how to get that image, I'm going to actually show you how to. We can add an image as well simply by hitting add, and then going and finding that image wherever it is saved for yourself. Okay, so I have this logo here, and once we're happy with which logo it is we want to put in, we're going to hit insert. Okay, so now you notice that I have just the name of what my logo was up here. Okay, of course we can put that logo down here as well, or we can put another logo in the footer as well if we want to add some more jazz to our report. If you notice as well, in the second section, I also have some text here. This is that insert auto text that we saw in the columns, but this is actually for our header. This just saves us having to retype that information every year or retype that date. This pulls that information out of the report tab that we see here, over here for the date that we set and things like that. So if you actually notice, if you ever want to get rid of these, you highlight them and hit delete. Okay, if you ever want to bring them back, of course, we can always just insert that auto text again. Okay, so if you notice, we have that header from, and we can pick whatever it is we want to see here. So maybe it's that company name or company description, sorry. The one thing that, just from a control standpoint, we may want to also add into our footers is we may want that time and date stamp, so we have that versioning of those reports. So to do that, we're actually going to insert an auto text, and we're actually going to insert a date and time. Okay, so we can put in the system date or system time, or both if we need to, for just to give us that versioning of those reports that we may have generated, just so people may not get confused as to which report we're talking about. So I'm actually going to go in there and just hop in, and I'm going to put the current system date, and under it I'm going to put in that time. Okay. So let's go ahead and actually save this, and I'm going to generate it just so you see how that logo populated on the report, along with our date and time stamp on the bottom footer.
Now, Brittany, I see that that was a logo that I provided to you, and there's no resizing options there. So if a logo's too big, will it fix it itself, or do you just need to talk to your marketing guy to get a new logo?
For the logo, and that's a great question actually, the logos actually need to be resized outside of MR before we bring them in. So you may want to go back and actually talk to your marketing guy and have it bring it a little bit smaller or bigger, or do any of those changes we want outside of MR. It will just bring in the actual JPEG image itself. Okay, so we do see that that logo has populated for us, and we can actually scroll down to that footer and we can see that date and time stamp for that versioning. Okay, I could have also put in a logo down at the bottom as well if we wanted to add in some extra text in there as well. Now, we are inside of the viewer now, so a little bit, not so much formatting, but if we wanted to on this one add in some comments or some reasoning as to why there's a certain balance, or just some notes for that when we share this back out. People may not ask us these questions, and we can put in some extra additional information inside of there. So if you notice, I'm actually going to pick this payroll account. We may think that it's in the negative, and we may go, I'm not really happy with that. So if I actually click on the number here and I hit this comment, I can actually add on some additional information. So I could put in some information here as to why this number is, or just add some additional, anything additional here we need to see. Okay. So as soon as I hit OK, we notice that we have a little note here, and you can actually see the note I wrote here, and it actually says who did it, and actually tags it. Okay. And if we actually notice, it actually added a little sticky note icon on the left-hand side just to indicate that someone has put a note. Okay. To be able to see that note, we just need to highlight it and go as well. Now, I'm sure we're all used to seeing as well is that we may populate a report, and then, you know, we notice that maybe we didn't post those adjustments that we needed to, or we needed further posting done, and we need to regenerate it. But we may have put all of those comments in that we were happy with for all the other accounts, and we may be scared that we might lose those comments as well. And we never lose those comments. Okay, we can actually copy them forward. So if I was to regenerate this report and I had this note here, I can actually use this little icon here that's called copy, and copy those notes forward from a previous report or a previously version of this report, and copy them forward so I don't necessarily have to lose them. So I'm just going to show you how that works by hitting that copy. Now you've noticed I've actually generated this report a few times here. Okay, so I generated it approximately 20 minutes or so ago. I could pull those notes forward simply by selecting them and hitting OK, and those notes will come forward and show exactly the way those notes are here. Okay. We can add notes not just necessarily on the line, we can do them on multiple lines as well. Just feel free and go note happy. Okay. The other thing that I want to talk about inside the viewer as well is that we have this export as well, is to Excel into XPS. If you'd like to export to Excel, all that information will go forward as well. When you do export to Excel, it is going to ask you what it is you want to export, whether it's the headers, the footers, the rows, the underscoring, and it's going to ask if you want to export those fonts and shading as well. If you untick this box, all that beautiful formatting that we may have done with that nice teal and the purple or whatever it is not going to come forward into Excel. So just be a little cognizant if you go and make these reports beautiful, that you may lose some of it when you go to Excel if we remember to not check off, or don't remember to check off this box. Clearly I can't talk today. Okay, so I'm just going to hit Excel, or hit it out and let it export to Excel. And in the meantime, I also want to share as well that it'll also export to XPS as well. And in case for some of you who don't know what XPS is Microsoft's version of PDF. It does the same way. It allows it so that people can't make changes to it. Okay? So that is inside of the viewer. Of course, if we are not used to using the viewer and we don't want to, all of this formatting that we've done, the purple and the teal and the boxes and all the rows and that nice little title we have here, that will all copy forward as well. It will still stay there if you use your web browser as well. So in that tools section where we turned on that viewer, don't be scared to only use the viewer. If you're more preferential to use that web browser, all of that formatting will carry forward as well. So please use either or. Just you'll notice that I've been using the viewer. The one reason I do like the viewer is just one, for the comments. I find there's a little bit of ease of use, okay, and just because I also like the other things as well, like the VCR buttons in the bottom to quickly go through pages if this report happened to be very lengthy. Okay. Now, we did have those notes, and it's on this level. We may have those reports that we're using that have multiple levels. You can put notes on multiple levels as well, and it will show you that they're there, and they will stay in their drill down. So I'm actually going to just regenerate this report here. Okay, and I'm going to put it down to financial and account and regenerate it. So it's just going to be a quick second here just to show you how those notes will filter through each level. Just bear with me one last time for generating this report. Now if you notice here, I double-clicked and went into that account to see some more information, which we may be used to seeing in some reports. I can add that note in, or that comment in here. Okay. We can put in that comment and hit OK, and we see that comment here. And if we go back to the other level, if you notice here, we kind of have those two little arrows going around, which sort of looks like that old recycle button. That's to indicate to us that we have a note on the next level, just to indicate to us that we need to see something and drill down a little further just to be able to see that note, so we know that when we have that sticky note here, that's the level in which it's residing, or where it started from. And the recycling button is just to show us that we need to go down one more level to see them. Okay. So that is some formatting we have inside of the web, inside of the viewer itself. And hopefully these are some nice formatting tips and tricks you guys can use in your reports and make them look beautiful. So I'm actually going to pass this back to Scott.
Okay, thank you very much, Brittany. So on the line, I don't see anyone posting questions right now. If you wanted to, actually I did find one. When we export our trial balance to Excel, some of the zero value accounts export to Excel as text values, and it appears as 0.00000 a report.
Is the question that we're seeing too many zeros, or
are you looking to have it not exported as text? I think it's coming in as text and rather have it come in as a general.
Okay, well, that is actually a good question and something we would love to follow up with you to see why your report is actually exporting with the zeros. But that is definitely a concern, definitely something we want to take a look at as well.
Sounds like we're taking that one offline. Thanks, Brittany. Brittany, well, I have a question myself. What about grouping stuff together where, if you have to change a logo, is that an available function?
That is an available function, and actually something we will be bringing up in another version, or another session we'll be having, is that if we made all of these headers and groupings beautiful, and we actually had a logo change and our marketing decided to change our logos, that we can group them together and change those logos at once, so that we don't have all that work of changing, say, our income statement and our trial balance and balance sheet all at once. But we will be covering that in another session.
Thank you, Brittany. Well, everyone, that wraps up today's presentation. Please, we encourage you to visit us online at www.endeavorsolutions.ca. Also, please follow us on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn account is used frequently to announce additional webinars such as this. You can also reach out to Steve Ewing, who manages sales for Toronto as well as Halifax, and Terry Sutherland, our president. Each are happy to engage with you. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.